Passionate, driven, enthusiastic, euphoric. This is who we are as entrepreneurs. But how we leverage these incredible attributes to dream and build businesses that scale and grow is what this podcast is all about. Hello, I'm attorneypreneur Josh Brown, and welcome to Franchise Euphoria. Are you searching for the right franchise but wondering where to start your search or how to be more efficient in your search? If so, you will definitely want to tune in today. I am thrilled to have Jim Gleason on the show today. Jim is the general manager of FranNet of Mid-America, a franchise consulting and brokerage company. In addition to matching individuals with a franchise business that will achieve their goals of business ownership, he is also a certified business coach with over 30 years combined experience in the corporate, counseling, and consulting worlds. Jim has a thorough understanding of the demands placed on individuals, both personally and professionally, and how to help them effectively deal with those demands and navigate the waters of change. Because of his personal experience of being involved in corporate downsizing, Jim went into business for himself in 1992. For several years, he was involved in outplacement work and career counseling. Jim has a BS in marketing from the Kelley School of Business at Indiana University and a master's in counseling from Butler University. That is quite the bio. Hello, Jim. How are you?
I'm good, Joe. How are you doing?
Doing well. I'm thrilled to have you on the show today. I mean, you've got such tremendous experience from being a franchise consultant, a coach, and obviously your own experience. It sounds like being downsized at one point, which kind of thrust you in to going into business for yourself. So we've got all sorts of stuff to talk about, but I always like to start the show with a little bit more background about you. I obviously read your bio, but any other information that you want to add to give the listeners some more information about you?
Sure. I was actually downsized twice before I decided to go into business for myself, and that's why I decided to go into business for myself, because I just came to the conclusion that I'm not have other people determine whether I'm going to work or not. I'm going to make that decision for myself, so that's why I did that in 1992. It's evolved over the years. In fact, one of the first things I did back then, it was probably more like 1994, I actually started looking at franchise businesses, and I went about it the wrong way. So I've kind of got the experience from how not to do it, and then getting into the franchise consulting world and understanding how it should be done. So I think that brings a good perspective from my part.
Well, how has being a coach helped you with the franchise consulting? Because I would think that you having that background experience would be a tremendous asset.
Yeah, actually, working as a franchise specialist and working with people and helping them find the right business is just another aspect of coaching. At least that's how I look at it, is trying to help people to find the right, whatever that is for them, whether that's a business or help them find the right solution to their business issues when I was doing the coaching. And yeah, it all evolved around people coming up with their own answers, but giving them some basis to come up with that answer. In other words, challenging them, asking them the right questions, and helping them to figure out what will work for them and what won't work for them in terms of their goals and their experiences.
Well, that's fascinating. Now, you said a few moments ago that you've sort of made some mistakes along the way in terms of when you were looking at your own franchise. I'd love if you could recount some of those for the audience.
Sure. One of the franchises I looked at, this is back in the mid-'90s probably, was one that did floor coverings, carpet, wooden floors, those kind of things, and I investigated it a little bit. I went down, visited their home office down in Atlanta, came back, and was ready to pull the trigger on it, and I thought, well, gosh, I really don't want to be selling floor coverings and carpet and stuff. And the mistake that I made, even though I would be involved in that aspect of it, I wasn't looking at it as a business. I was looking at it as a job. And what happens is too often when people start looking at franchising, and this is what I did, is that here is this business, for example, if it's residential cleaning, gosh, am I going to be cleaning toilets and windows and things like that? Well, no, you're not. In my case, am I actually going to be laying carpeting and all those kind of things? No, I'm not. I'm actually running a business. I've got people that are doing those other things. So using Michael Gerber's concepts from the E-Myth Revisited, as an owner, I would be working on the business, not in the business. And what I was not doing was separating the function of the business from the function of the owner. In other words, I wouldn't be doing the carpeting. I would be out there marketing the business, developing the business, making sure the quality was there, making sure the employees were doing what they needed to do. But I wouldn't actually be doing the actual business. And so that was one of the biggest mistakes that I made.
Well, and that's such a great point because, we hear that all the time. I mean, I think part of the reason people look to franchises is they sort of feel like they're buying that business in a box. They're buying that business that all they have to do is slap down some money and boom, they're going to have a business that's going to be up and profitable. And I think what people don't realize, because they don't do the kind of due diligence, they don't speak to people like yourself and other professionals, is they don't really understand what they're getting into. And I think a lot of times, because so many people come into franchising from the corporate world or being corporate downsized, they're so used to having a job that that's the mindset they've had their entire career. How do you help people overcome that?
Well, you're exactly right. In fact, what happened several years ago, I was at a networking event, and after the event, this lady came up to me and said, "I wish I would have met you 2 years because I'm in the wrong business." She was in a franchise business and do the investigation the right way. Typically what happens is when somebody starts looking at a franchise, they get on the internet and they'll start looking at the public website and start making their decisions about the franchise based upon that information. And they really don't understand how to go about investigating the business and asking the right questions because they simply don't know what they don't know. What question should I ask the franchisor? What do I need to understand? What does this franchise disclosure document, which you obviously help people with that, but what does this tell me? What questions should I be asking the franchisee? So what happens is people really shortcut the due diligence process because they really don't understand how in-depth it be. And so what we do is we guide people through that whole process to make sure that they're taking the time, they're evaluating the information that they're getting, and they're doing the kind of things that they need to do. Because the way I look at this is when you're buying a business or going into business for yourself, you're probably making one of the top 5 decisions you're going to make in your lifetime because of the impact it's going to have on you and your family. And so you need to make sure you're doing your due diligence and coming up with a business that's going to be something that you're going to enjoy doing and that you're good at.
Oh, I love that. I think that's fantastic advice. So if I'm someone out there right now and I'm at the early stages and I'm considering a franchise or possibly looking at a variety of franchises, what do you do specifically to get people started? So if I'm coming to you as a potential client, what is the first thing that you do to sort of assess where they're at and assess if they're even going about it the right way?
One of the most important things I believe in when people are looking at franchises, they need to be educated about what franchising is and what it is not. People have a perception of what franchising is, and it's almost based upon fast food. And certainly that's a legitimate to a limited degree. It sets a certain mindset, though, that you have to have a building, you have prime location, and you're going to have inventory, and you're going to deal with, as a mind says, hormonally challenged teenagers. And so that's the perception most people of what franchising is. What we want to do is we want to give people a good education about franchising, have a foundation that you're building your decision on. In other words, by getting good education about what franchising is and what it is not, what you're going to learn is, number one, is franchise, is it even for me? Because it's certainly not for everybody. If it's not for you, that education has been invaluable. You just saved yourself a lot of time and headaches. But if it is for you, then you have a foundation to build from to take the next step forward. And so now the analogy I use, it's kind of like with Bobby Knight. No matter what you thought about him as an individual, he's a great basketball coach because he was so fundamentally strong. His teams are fundamentally strong. And that's what a person needs, is to have good, strong fundamentals, especially when they're going into something brand new that is something that they've never crossed the borders with before, such as franchising.
That's great. I love that analogy, and it's so true. I mean, because you have to have that foundation. And I think, too, you hit on how important personality is when determining, A, if franchising is right for you, and B, what kind of franchise you go into. I'm curious with FranNet, how you guys assess personality. Do you have questions that you put people through? Do you have tests that you put people through? Because I think it's very, very important, and I think you do as well. And I'm just curious how you address that.
Yes, we start with after we do the education piece and somebody says, yeah, I want to pursue this forward. We have an online assessment that we send people, and it looks at their background, looks at their goals, their experience, the kind of things that they enjoy doing. It also looks at how much money they want to make, how much they're able to invest. But a big part of that is, for lack of a better term, a personality profile. And actually it looks at values, characteristics, and motivational characteristics. There's a number of questions that we ask people. And then when we get that information back, it says, okay, this is your profile. Here are franchisors, successful franchisees with a similar profile. So that's the start where we do kind of this matchmaking process. And then beyond, after we get that information back, we sit down with our clients and ask them a bunch of other questions, basically do a 2-hour interview, because we want to understand as clearly as possible what their goals are, both short-term and long-term, financial, lifestyle, those different things. And so that from that, we start doing this, okay, this profile based upon how you've answered this question and the goals that you have. Here are 2 or 3 franchises that, as we understand your goals, that will help you achieve those type of things.
Now, how do you address capitalization, money, the big money issue? I think it's always probably the big elephant in the room. And I imagine you get a lot of people who come to you that may think they have enough money saved, may think that they're well capitalized or have access to enough capital, but may turn out that they don't. Is that something that you address at the outset? And then also after you address it, assuming they move forward, what is your recommendation for how much capital people should have before they get started? Obviously, every franchise is different, but just in general, before they get started with the franchise business.
Well, yeah, certainly the financial aspect of it is, as you say, it's the elephant in the room, and we have that up front, and part of that assessment process is looking at the financials, because if the reality is, if a person is not financially capable, there's really nothing we can do to help them. I mean, that it sounds somewhat crass, but that's really the bottom line. And we get that information back, and from that I can then get on the phone with a person and kind of chat with them. Kind of give you an example. I've done a lot of work with veterans groups, the Indiana National Guard, and quite often I will have a veteran or somebody that's active duty that will want to meet, and we'll sit down, we'll talk about and what they're doing, and bravo on their part. They're saying, okay, I'm probably going to be in the force for another 4 years. I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to need financially to position myself so when I do retire that I can get into a business. And so what are the things that I need to start doing? So yeah, the financial aspect is huge. We do address it. We work with a number of banks that refer folks to, but quite honestly, the banking issue is still a major one. But there are other avenues where people can look to. There's alternative financing through loan brokers. Another one that a lot of people aren't aware of is an individual can use 401k or IRA monies, and they can be converted, so there's no tax penalties. In fact, there's some tax advantages. So we're basically doing equity financing. And so there's ways to do that. We have companies that we work with in helping them to do those type of things. So, yeah, it is a major issue, and that's certainly one of the things that's in a person's way of being able to move forward with the whole franchising or going into business for themselves in any means.
Well, and for me, I think that one of the things that separates the good consultants from the others is that it's not just about having the money just to get started. It's about putting yourself in a position where you're going to be most successful. Mm-hmm. And what I see is good consultants such as yourself, they don't just say, okay, do you have the minimal amount that is necessary to get you going? The question is, okay, that's a given. You have to have that. Right. But do you have enough to get you through the rough patches? Do you have enough to get the business up and going? Because I think that's a big misnomer in franchising. At least I see it all the time. Is that people feel like all they need is the money to get in, and that's just the start. You have to have that, but you have to understand as a franchise, just because you have the brand, just because you have the support of the franchise, or just because you have what you hope is the proven concept and you're in the great market, you're still going to go through the same cycles that businesses go through. You can't avoid that. So you have to be in a position. I mean, I tell my clients, Jim, that, they need to have 6 to 9 months in reserves. I don't know if that's what you tell people as well.
What I tell people to 12.
Wow, there you go. So you're even more, because
I'm pretty conservative on that. And you're exactly right. They have to have money in order to pay the mortgage, feed their kids. They have to have money to keep the business sustainable. One of the biggest, as you know, one of the biggest reasons for business failure is lack of working capital. In other words, enough money to stay in business long enough to become profitable. And if you don't have that, it makes absolutely no sense moving forward, because you're going to have a bunch of sleepless nights, and at the end, you're going to lose your business. And so absolutely the things that needs to happen, and that you're alluding to also, is that a lot of people, franchises are plug, play, and walk away. No, it's not. In fact, I will tell my clients that whether you're going to start a business from scratch or you're starting using a franchise, you're going to have to work just as hard. The advantage of the franchise is you're going to avoid a lot of the mistakes that you're going to make if you're doing it from scratch, because they already got the systems in place. They know what type of marketing system to use, et cetera, et cetera. But it doesn't mean you're going to work any less diligently at the business.
So how long does this process take? I mean, from start to finish, from somebody, first calling you or emailing you or stopping in to see you, to the point where they're looking at the documents and reviewing the documents to sign? The
average length of time where people are going to at least have enough information to make a decision is probably 60 to 90 days. I've seen it. In fact, I just came back from a conference where there were some people that had actually gotten in through the process in about 30 days. And I personally had a client that took 14 months. But on an average, I'd say people are looking at 60 to 120 days. That's pretty reasonable. Maybe 160 days, something like that.
Yeah, that's pretty fast. Yeah.
And, the other part of franchising is that people have to also understand it's first served in the franchise industry, and you get it extended too far, and it's a franchise that has a lot of activity. You might have a territory that would get bought out from under you, because as a franchisor, they know that most people are not going to buy the franchise, and therefore whoever comes to the plate first with the right capital and the right background, they're the one, and that are willing to make the commitment, they're the ones that are going to get the territory.
So you've been doing this a while now. Have you seen in your experience a pattern where you meet with somebody, you talk with somebody, and you can quickly tell, okay, this person's not going to be right for franchising, or the reverse of that, this person is perfect for franchising?
It's to say that's not right for it. That's actually an position, because there's a couple people that I really questioned about whether they would follow through and if they were right. And they're in business now. They've been in business now about a year, and they're doing very, very well. But part of it is, what I tell my clients is that in order to be successful in business, what do you think the most important thing is? And people throw out a lot of different things. In my opinion, is what people really need to do is be brutally honest with themselves and understand themselves. In other words, are you willing to do the things that the franchisor is telling you, and the franchisees that you're talking to, they're telling you that you're going to need to do in order to be successful? Will you be out there making the calls, doing the marketing, or whatever it's going to require? And don't kid yourself as to whether you're willing to do that or not. And I had a client early on that, by all indications, everything should have worked for him. And he knew he was going to have to be out there and do networking and meet people and all those kind of things. And he said he was willing to do that. In fact, he had experience doing that in another job. He got into the franchise, and he sat in his office waiting for the phone to ring. And as a result of that, he made a huge investment in something that didn't work for him, because he was not being honest with himself. He knew what he needed to do, but he didn't do what he knew he needed to do. So,
yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, it's so interesting, because at the end of the day, I mean, it seems so obvious, but so many people don't do this. They fall prey to it, or they just don't even, for whatever reason, they don't give it a thought. But you got to buy into the franchise. I mean, that's what you're literally buying into. You have to believe in their system. Now, sure, you have to, I always recommend you want to be part of a system that values the input of the franchisees. That they can't, especially with the larger systems, they can't take each individual complaint or question and necessarily make a change. But that's what franchisee associations are for, and so on. But the point is, you want to make sure that at least somebody is listening, so that if there's multiple franchisees that are saying the same things, maybe they're making changes. But at the end of the day, the people who go into franchising thinking that they're going to change the system, they fail. Because you're not going to change the system, most likely.
Yeah. And what I will tell my clients is that, are you willing to follow the system? Because I don't want you buying something that you're not going to use. Understand the system, understand all the various aspects of it, and then decide whether this is something that you're willing to use, because you're going to pay a fee to get these systems. And you're not going to use them, then set that fee and go start your own business doing it your way. It makes no sense to me, just like you're saying, to buy something and don't use what you just purchased. Invest more than purchased that you've invested in.
Yeah, and I think that ties into, going back to what we talked about earlier, going back to knowing your personality, knowing who you are, because, I believe, and I don't know if you agree with this or not, Jim, I think some people are just too entrepreneurial to be franchise owners. They need to be the franchisor. They need to be the person coming up with the business that they then go and franchise, because some people, and look, I'd probably put myself in this category in the sense of, you get into a business, you get into a system, and you're constantly saying, how could this be better? Oh, I could do it this way. I could do it that way. It may not be a good fit for you.
Absolutely. In fact, one of the scale, the assessment that we do is how much they are willing to follow a system, and we get that back. Most people we find are usually either average or high compliant. But when you get somebody that's on the low compliance, why are you wanting to buy a franchise? Because it would appear that you're probably not going to comply with this that you're purchasing. And you're exactly right. There are some people that should not be in a franchise, for one, because they are, like you say, too entrepreneurial, and at the other end, they just like to have that corporate entity around them. In fact, I've worked with some high-level executives that trying to get into a business, start their own business, was very difficult because they have all the business knowledge, they have the skills and all those type of things, but they're used to having the structure of people around them and not have to create that. And, in a franchise, even as a franchisee, even though you have the systems, you still have to create the people around you. And hiring people for your own business is much different than hiring people for somebody else's business that you're working for, because in your own business, you're creating a culture. And that's a much different type of situation than hiring employees for a culture that already exists.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point. So in everything that you do for somebody, I mean, it sounds like there's a tremendous amount of work that goes into from the first phone call to finding the right franchise. And to some people out there, it may sound like, wow, this is going to cost me a fortune. But they may be surprised it actually costs them nothing to come see you. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Sure. Everything that we do, from the education, from doing the assessment, the interview, making the recommendations, and we stick with our clients through the whole due diligence process. We provide questions asked franchisors, franchisees, tips for when they go visit the franchisor, which typically is called a discovery day, reviewing the franchise disclosure document, all those things. We work with them through that whole process. And as you say, our services are free to our clients, because what happens is if somebody purchases a franchise, the franchisor pays us. And they're willing to do that because our obligation is to pre-qualify the individuals before they ever get to the franchisor. So we're saving the franchisor a lot of money in terms of marketing, advertising, dealing with tire kickers. And even though it would appear that because the franchisor pays me, that I'm working for the franchisor, my focus is on my clients to make sure whatever the business is the right fit for them, or that we being a franchisee is really not for you. And I've actually worked with some people to make that decision, and I've actually helped people get into a couple franchises that I don't even represent because they were good matches for them, and I was already working with them, and so helped them make a decision for a business that I don't work with.
Well, that's great. I'm really glad you provide that information, because I think that it's so important for people. I mean, in every industry, there's bad apples. I mean, right, with even my own industry, with attorneys, there's a lot of bad attorneys out there that don't have the clients as their number one priority. Just like there's consultants out there, franchise consultants, but you are certainly not one of them. And it's so important that people know that you need, as an individual looking to buy a franchise, you need to pre-qualify your consultant too. You need to make sure that you're dealing with somebody who has experience, who is working for a reputable company, and do the same due diligence on that front that the consultant is going to do for you on the franchise front. And
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so vital. Now tell me, what's the number one biggest mistake you see people make in franchising, as opposed to, we talked about undercapitalization. We talked about not doing due diligence. Is there anything else that you see that people routinely make before they buy a franchise? I
think the thing that a lot of people seem to have a real difficult time, and we talked about this earlier, is separating what they're going to be doing from what the function of the business really is. They get hung up on that. And then the other thing that I see a lot of, this is a real critical issue, is friends, family, whatever, they start advising them, saying, well, you got to be crazy. You're going into business and the economy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And their intentions are good, and clients listen to them. But the thing that the clients tend to forget is the client has done all this research, and they've got all these facts. These friends, family are all making their advice based upon emotion, not facts.
I love that. I really love that. That resonates so well with me, because I think so many people, whether you buy a franchise, whether you go and buy a non-franchise business, a big obstacle you have to overcome is what I call head trash. And it's head trash from a lot of other, from both your, things that you are thinking about, but then it's human nature to go talk to people and talk to people that you're close to. But what you find out, and I talk to people all the time who tell me the same thing, is that you will get that person, or in some situations, multiple people who you're close to and whatnot, and they will give you bad advice. And it's because of stuff going on with themselves more than it is about you. So you have to be able to separate the emotion, the person, from the facts. And you have to be strong enough in your own convictions to say, well, this is what I believe in. This is what I'm passionate about. This is what I want to do, and this is how I'm going to do it. And be able to, if everybody agrees with you, you're probably doing something wrong. If people don't agree with you, you're probably on the right path. You know, it's funny how that works. But, well, I really appreciate your time today. I want to wrap up with one question, and then I want to give you an opportunity to tell people where they can reach you. I sort of want to wrap it up with all your years of experience, what is one piece of advice you would give to the would-be franchise purchasers out there, the people who are out there right now, either in the corporate world, dying to get out of it, or in the process of being downsized where they don't have the opportunities? You know, what's one piece of advice you would give to them as they seek out their franchise?
What people need to do is give themselves the opportunity to investigate what the various avenues are for themselves. Franchising, startup, looking at purchasing a business, and then start understanding that at a certain point you need to get focused. Because if you keep all those out, you start with those options, but if you keep all those options in front of you, you lack focus, and therefore your decision-making process becomes fragmented. And so I sometimes will tell clients, you know, you're looking for a job, you're looking to franchise, maybe you ought to spend the next 6 weeks just focusing on a job only, so you have some focus. And if after 6 weeks you find that that's not working for you, then let's talk again, or vice versa. And, you know, I'll tell them, it may sound self-serving, but why don't you spend the next 6 weeks just focused on looking at the franchise? If that doesn't work for you, move forward. In other words, you have to have focus. Otherwise, the decisions are going to be less than the right ones typically.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's in anything you do. That's so, so huge. I'm part of a mastermind group with a really popular podcaster named John Lee Dumas, who has a podcast called Entrepreneur on Fire, and he interviews entrepreneurs all over the world. And he sort of coined this focus acronym of follow one course until success. And I think that's perfect. And it's perfect when you own a business, but it's even more appropriate when you're getting started in a business, because you get on the internet, you talk to people, and you sort of find yourself, I think a lot of people find themselves getting off course. So that's, I think, really great piece of advice. And now finally, Jim, where can people find you? What's the best way to get a hold of you? And anything else you want to finish up the interview telling about your business, go ahead.
Sure. The best way to get a hold of me in one of two ways. Either call me, my number is 317-850-8851. Again, 317-850-8851. Or they can email me at jgleason, JGLEASON at FranNet, FRANNET.com. And I think people just need to understand franchising is a great alternative to being in the corporate world, and it's a way to get into business, to mitigate your risk, to be successful quicker, but it still takes a lot of hard work, but it's a great alternative to working for somebody else. You get control over your life, and you can do pretty well.
Well, thank you so much, Jim. Again, it's been great having you on the show, and I look forward to staying in touch with you.
Thanks, Josh. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us today on the Franchise Euphoria podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to go to iTunes and provide a review. Also, please remember that although Josh Brown is a licensed and practicing attorney, nothing contained in this podcast should be construed as legal advice, because it is not. The information contained in this podcast is general and educational in nature, and none of it should be relied upon as legal advice. That being said, if you have questions for Josh and would like to contact him, please email him at josh@franchiseeuphoria.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you tune in to our next weekly episode.